Secondly, we are challenged by the life of Jesus, who gave himself for the poor and the outcast, the despised and the rejected. We must take concrete actions, in my opinion, to reduce poverty in our own time and place, anchored in Jesus' passionate concern for the least of these. This challenge must not be confined to personal generosity, but community action and national policy, going to the root of the problem, finding solutions that work and that last. Here a quote from Pope Paul II. Pope John Paul said this: "I dream of a world where none will be so poor they have nothing to give, and none will be so rich they have nothing to receive." My hope is that Baptists will join Lutherans and Methodists and Coptic Orthodox and Syrian Orthodox and Serbian Orthodox. We'll join the Progressive Baptists and the American Baptists. We'll join the Swedenborgians. We'll join the Martomas, churches that I hadn't heard of but are part of the National Council of Churches. We'll join the Roman Catholics. We'll join all of the faith communities in ending the poverty that kills. God's calling us to this moment. Millions and millions of children are dying today because they're drinking polluted water. Millions and millions of persons are dying today because we haven't addressed the issue of world hunger. God's calling us to this moment. We are the leaders we have been waiting for. I need to say a word about the Congress of the United States. I served there for 12 years. They're basically good people. We lock 435 egos in one room, call that the House of Representatives. We take two people with large egos and put them in another room and call that the Senate, 100 of them. We take the person with the largest ego and we put them down in the White House. And often we think they're leading us. My experience is that we would not have had the civil rights legislation if it were not for a Baptist preacher speaking truth to power. We'd not had issues relating to clean energy and clean water if it had not been a push from the bottom to the top. God is calling us to be the leaders we've been waiting for. And in our lifetime, we can end the poverty that kills. We can address the issues domestically, like public education and quality health care. Why isn't it okay for 46 million of us not to have health care, for 37 million of us to be below the poverty level, and 13 million children not to have access to health care and a quality of life? God's calling us, not as Baptists or Lutherans or Presbyterians, but as Christians, to walk in the footsteps of Jesus and to hear the words of Paul: "I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink." God's calling us to this moment. The biblical Christian is also called by the Scriptures to exercise reverential stewardship to God's given planet. Rooted in the earliest age of mankind in the Garden of Eden, we must fight the efforts of many to pillage and pollute, to waste and destroy the natural environment on which life itself exists. We are calling all churches, whether they belong to the National Council of Churches or to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops or to the Evangelical Association, to today recognize that global warming is real and that God's calling us to be stewards of a fragile planet. We're calling on all churches and synagogues and mosques to think about building those institutions as a green facility. I visited a group of Roman Catholic nuns just south of Detroit and discovered they took a 1930s mother house, renovated it to be completely environmentally sound. They use geothermal energy to heat the water. The water used in the showers is then recycled into the toilets to be flushed. They don't mow their lawns as carefully as they used to because they know the water needs to percolate in the ground. And this one group of Roman Catholic women have committed themselves to care for the earth that God's given them. What if every faith community in the world took seriously the care of the earth? Quickly, let me just say two other quick points. The persons who would be Jesus' disciples will be found standing in strong defense of people's rights all over the world, believing that such dehumanizing acts as racial or gender discrimination, torture, invasion of privacy are an affront to the will of God for His creation. The church should be the first line of protection for the disadvantaged, the powerless, the overlooked, who have no other advocate but Christ and His followers. Just before Hubert Humphrey died, he gave a speech before a joint session of the House and Senate, an honor that's usually only reserved for presidents. He told a story on himself. He was known for his long speeches. His wife one time came up to him and said, "Hubert, you don't have to talk eternally to be immortal." But then he shared with us what he said was the most profound quote that he had used in his work as a senator. He said this: "The moral test of government is what we do for those in the dawn of life, our children, those in the twilight of life, the elderly, and all of those in the shadows of life, the poor, the sick, and the disabled." What if that was the moral test of the Christian church? What we do for our children, what we do for the elderly, and what we do for all of those who fall in the shadows of life. We who would claim the name of Christ must express His hospitality in the face of the whirlwind of culture, language, race, values, and dreams that our world presents us in the form of accelerating pluralism in every community where we serve. Jesus found kinship with those His own religious hierarchy condemned, those His own culture rejected, those His own heritage devalued. Jesus saw only God's priceless creative will and boundless love in the faces of Samaritans, the stranger, the other. A God who would find joy in populating the world with such extravagant diversity certainly must find grief in our rejection of His banquet feast. Christians must learn to live together. It was indicated in my introduction that Baptists have sometimes had trouble with the National Council of Churches. You might be interested to know we got lots of Baptists in the National Council of Churches, the American Baptists, the Progressive Baptists, and National Baptists. You could name a few others as part of our membership. You all love cooperative Baptists. We've got some uncooperative Baptists as well. We've got Jimmy Carter Baptist. But what we do have in common, whether we're inside partnerships and organizations or outside, what we do have in common is Jesus Christ. We have His words, we have His teachings. I jokingly say to my friends in mainline church, stop taking votes. God's will isn't what one more than half of you think it is. And you don't need new policy resolutions. You got the Old and the New Testament. Read the whole of the Scripture. Discover the whole of the text. There are more than 2,000 verses that have God reminding us to love the unlovable, to touch the outcast, and to care for the least of these, our brothers and sisters. So peace, poverty, planet Earth, people's rights, and pluralism are the goals of the National Council of Churches. And we decided, when I took over with some financial exigency, that our main mission was not to create a new idea every year, but to work on poverty until we end the poverty that kills, to work on the environment until we heal the planet, and to work on the issues of peace and justice until justice arrives and until peace is achieved. God's calling us to that moment.